Welcome, everyone. This is Mary Vandenplas, Director of Operations and Research here at Burtch Works. Today, our founder and managing director, Linda Burtch, will be sharing her predictions for the 2020 data science and analytics hiring market. And now I'd like to introduce your speaker for today, Linda Burtch. Linda is an industry leader in the analytics and data science recruiting space and has dedicated her career to becoming a subject matter expert on the quantitative hiring market. She's a frequent speaker on career and hiring topics and is also an active member of the American Statistical Association and Informs. She often shares her insights on Burtch Works blog. For those of you who aren't familiar with Burtch Works, we're an executive recruiting firm specializing in quantitative fields like analytics, data science, and marketing research. Over the past several years, Linda and Burtch Works have been repeatedly mentioned in the press, including The Economist, The New York Times, The Wall Street Journal, CNBC, and the Chicago Tribune, among many others. Burtch Works has also been repeatedly recognized by Forbes as one of America's best recruiting firms. Linda, I'll turn things over to you.
Thanks a lot, Mary. It's 2020. Wow, it's start of a new decade. A lot has certainly happened, and when you think about it, in 2010, the iPad was introduced by Steve Jobs. We were all still recovering from the Great Recession, and Burtch Works was just 1 year old. So during this decade, cloud computing made the big data craze possible, and I think that that's the biggest development for us. And from that, AI emerged, and probably permanently from its last winter. I don't have any idea what's in store for us over this next decade, but I do have a few ideas on what might be experiencing in the next 12 months. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So thanks for joining me. As a recruiter, my job is to talk to people, lots and lots of people. And I talk to them about lots of industries, technologies, tools, applications areas, software, on and on and on. And it's not, all shop talk. We also get into things like vacation plans, or we chat about their kids. Sometimes they ask me to give their kids advice about their careers, and maybe even what's for dinner that night. So it tends to be broad ranging, and this is how I learn. I ask a million questions. Now, when my kids were teenagers, they would invite their friends over, and they would actually warn them about me, that they were going to be bombarded with questions. But I just can't help myself anymore. So from all these conversations in the last year, this is kind of a distillation of what I think the dominant trends are going to be. So let's see if you agree. Number one, artificial intelligence is everywhere. It's in book titles, it's conference topics, there are project proposals out there, and now it's pretty much the next greatest thing. Now, let me ask you this. Whatever happened to simply talking about data science, which itself became a really loosely used descriptor? Or if you reach back a little bit further than that, whatever happened to the phrase big data? Right, that was so 5 years ago. We will likely see the definition of artificial intelligence become more broadly defined as we go forward and as more organizations attempt to jump in. The scary part is that is going to happen whether they actually have a well-defined need for an AI application or not. And I have a very simple way of defining AI that I'd like to share with you. I think if you have an application that uses sensing to collect data, so let's say NLP or computer vision or IoT, and you use that data to teach a machine to make decisions, then you have an artificial intelligence application. Now, don't get me wrong here. I think AI is really, really important. There are many, many studies out there that say effective deployment of artificial intelligence will result in a very distinct competitive advantage. So if you ignore AI, you may find yourself within an organization that is going to be left behind. Number two, as data science continues to mature, I've been fielding more requests for candidates who can actually take their quantitative background and pivot and use it in innovations or in a product management capacity. Now think about it. There is no one better to explore new innovations based on data than somebody who actually knows what the data is capable of. Predictive analytics has been around for decades, as we all know, but with the increased computer power and low cost storage, and then add to that the much more advanced algorithms of today, there needs to be someone on the team, and maybe that's the director or the head of the group, or maybe it's a new role, on the lookout for innovative ways to apply the data to inform better decisioning. Then that leads right into another new role that we're seeing. Companies are collecting and organizing data with the idea that they may be able to monetize it in some way, as we all know. We're working on a number of roles like this within healthcare, just to give you one example, but there are dozens, both at large companies as well as at startups within the healthcare space, figuring out ways to use aggregate data to better inform employers of opportunities for, let's say, maybe encouraging better health habits of their employees, or maybe using data to inform the pharmaceutical companies on off-label use of some of their products and its effectiveness, lots and lots of different kinds of applications. Number three, I predict that as firms continue to look for ways to improve enterprise-wide adaptation of analytics, the practice of upskilling to increase data literacy throughout different business units is going to pretty much become the norm. Again, analytics initiatives will not survive if there is not wide adaptation of the tools throughout the enterprise. So many companies are addressing this through training all their staffers, so bringing up the math literacy within the organization overall. We decided to put some numbers around this. So a few months ago, we conducted a flash survey. Most of you know about our flash surveys, and many of you participate. But for those of you who don't, we send out a survey question, and it's usually just one question. Sometimes it's two questions, asking a straightforward question, and then we get tons of responses back because it only takes 2 seconds to respond to it, and then we marry that up with the information that we already know about our contacts, where they're working and where they live, and what their level of experience is, and so on and so forth. So it gives us a very good idea of what's going on out there, and then we share that back with the community. So in this particular case, we asked the question, does your firm offer data literacy resources beyond the analytics group? And the results showed 72% of firms have training or resources available to bring up the organization's data literacy, and that was much higher than I anticipated. Here you can see the different types of resources that these companies say they are offering. Clearly, there's a lot of lunch and learns. One company I heard offers Python training to anybody who's interested in the organization and learning it. Another company put together a set of online MOOCs toward a data science certificate, and whoever completed that program was guaranteed a place on the data science team. Now, this wasn't a simple set of courses. This program would take somebody at least 18 months of continuous coursework in order to pass it. So anyway, there's just lots and lots of cool things out there to bring up data literacy. Number 4, cybersecurity roles include many, many positions for quantitative professionals using techniques such as pattern recognition and evaluating risk. The job openings in this area continue to increase, and it has resulted in a very persistent hiring gap. Now, this one, I have to say, is not a profound prediction on my part. While the number of graduates in this with these specialized skills has really been increasing. Reports have shown that a significant hiring gap that persisted due to the ever-increasing demand of our overwhelmingly digital world. There is just so much competition for this same kind of talent. So we're working on a few roles like this, actually. There's a young company in Boston that's staffing up their team, and we're working with them, and several others have been inquiring. Number 5, for those of you not already familiar, salary history bands are local or statewide laws that aim to address pay discrimination by preventing employers from asking potential candidates about their current compensation or their compensation history. So I really like the intent here. I fear the unintended consequences. I take a much more contrarian point of view on this. My thinking is that we should all be much more transparent about how much money we make. That will eliminate all the funny business that's going on out there. It's my opinion that the best route to salary equality is actually through transparency. Uh, Everybody knows that there's a very strong cultural taboo around salary discussions, and I think that works to the benefit of the company. I have people tell me that besides their spouse or maybe their accountant, I'm the only person who knows what their salary is, which I think is just crazy. Many of you have heard about the salary spreadsheet that was circulated by the Google engineers to expose their employers' pay disparities. I also gave a talk at a recent Forrester gathering, and I was talking alongside 2 women from WeWork who actually used that same technique. And then, they told me that things in the organization after that really changed. So I thought I could share kind of a really old story from my own personal experience. I worked at Ponderosa, which is a fast food steak. It's like the pre-Outback, I guess, when I was 15 years old. And still in high school. I became buddies with the grill cooks, and of course, they were all guys. And I was so bold as to ask them how much money they made. And they told me that they made between $2.25 an hour to $2.50 an hour. And I was shocked because I made $1.65 an hour. And I did the cash register and the order taking, and I would argue that those jobs took a lot more smarts. So I decided what I was going to do was learn how to become a cook. What resulted after that was the district manager got called in. We had a sit down and a little discussion about not being a crusader in the organization. But guess what? I got a raise. So my theory is that without salary transparency during the hiring process, the higher salaries are simply going to go to the more aggressive negotiators. Only time will tell what types of consequences these bans will have, but I suspect that it is not going to move us in the right direction. Number 6. In our 10-year anniversary blog post that many of you might have seen, it came out a couple months ago, I talked about how there is this intense spotlight on GDPR, data breaches, privacy, and ethics now more than ever. So data science, of course, is right in the thick of all of that. It's going to be more and more critical that data science leaders have the capability to shepherd their organization through this landscape. That kind of goes without saying. Now companies that are in financial services or healthcare, they've lived in this world for a long time, but is now spreading across pretty much any application. Quick examples would include, of course, the tech giants like Google and Facebook, but government is also an obvious place where data ethics is huge. E-commerce is another great example, and I'm thinking about, Walmart and Amazon in these cases. They know pretty much everything about you. So anyway, this list continues to grow pretty much all the time. Number 7, we are headed for a shakeout. And I think a lot of people have their heads buried in the sand about this. And as smart and talented as data scientists are, they're not necessarily going to be exempt from this. I really need to check out LinkedIn to see whether or not those 2 women from WeWork, if they're still there or not. They told me that they were getting, this was back in like October, they told me they were getting bombarded with calls. So supply and demand is still working in the data scientist's favor, but creating value for an organization is front and center, and that is how your contribution is going to be evaluated, and you can't ever forget that. I'm about halfway through a book that came out just this last Tuesday. I actually had a long day going to New York and back, so I had a lot of time to read, and it's called Uncanny Valley. It's a memoir written by Anna Weiner, who worked in publishing in New York, and then she moved out to California to see if she could get a job in tech. And she did. She got a job with, guess what? A data analytics firm in customer support. It's a bit of a tell-all, but it kind of highlights the hyperbole that's happening in tech. So I think it might be a really fun read for many of you. Anyway, only time will tell what's going to happen. Okay, I call this my grandparents' prediction slide. In 2018, I predicted that they would be discussing artificial intelligence. Last year, I predicted that they would know how to pronounce Huawei. So this year, I think they're going to be talking about cryptocurrency. My colleague, Heidi Kalish, talked about this in one of her recent blog pieces. There's no doubt about the growing consumer curiosity about things like Bitcoin and Ethereum. So don't be surprised if your parents get into a discussion with you about blockchain. Number 9, data science bootcamp grads are going to face more scrutiny, but I'm actually surprised that this hasn't come up sooner. Now, I'm not going to argue that there's not a talent shortage. There clearly is, but there's a race going on in higher education now to close that gap, with over 270 graduate programs now being offered, according to some data collected by Michael Rappa at North Carolina State University. But turning somebody into a data scientist in 12 weeks, I say it depends on their foundation. They need to be going in with a pretty strong foundation in math and computer science in order to make this a reality. And as I say all the time, math and operations research, statistics, this stuff is hard. Math is something that you build on. There's no way to start, let's say at chapter 10 and expect to have any idea what's going on. And I'm sure that all of you know exactly what I'm talking about here. Companies are much more skeptical now, so make sure that you're selective if you're considering a boot camp to beef up your skills or to pivot your career. So that's what I have for this year. Now, once again, time will tell on how well I do. It's the beginning of the year and it's time for resolution. So I have a suggestion. So at the risk of sounding like a broken record on this, I just want to encourage and all of you to invest time to learn something new this year. Now things are changing, and a quick and sort of obvious example, Python is now the tool of choice for most quantitative people. But if you're still clinging to R, move on, and please take SAS off your resume at this point. But a warning to all of you, don't get too wedded to Python either. So a big thanks to all of you for attending today, and thanks for staying in touch and engaging with our community. I count many, many of you as my friends, and it's been a privilege to have an opportunity to work with you. You've taught me everything I know, and I'm not kidding. So stay in touch. Let me know if you need help with your recruiting or to do some brainstorming on your own personal career strategy. Now it's time to hand things back to Mary, who has a few announcements before we get started on the Q&A, which is my favorite part of things. Thanks, everybody.
And thank you as well, Linda. And of course, I want to also reiterate thanks to all of you who are joining us and everyone else who helps Burtch Works do what we do here. Just a few quick items before we get to that Q&A. If you're interested in our salary data, our full report breaks down salaries by quartiles, looks at salary means as well as medians, and examines salaries by demographic factors like industry, gender, region, and much more. You can download it for free at burtchworks.com/study. And if you're looking to add to your data science and analytics staff in 2020, we'd be happy to speak with you and do some brainstorming. We offer contingency and retained services from entry-level analysts all the way up to chief analytics officer searches. Just send us an email at info@burtchworks.com to learn more. And if you're looking to browse for new opportunities, you can check out our targeted job board, which is trafficked by thousands of quantitative professionals in a variety of fields. For more hiring market insights, check out burtchworks.com/blog, where you can find flash survey results, information on analytics tools, salaries, and other important information, including Linda's blog about her 2020 predictions. You can also follow Burtch Works across our social media channels to stay up to date on our latest research. And at YouTube at youtube.com/BurtchWorks, you can find recordings of our other presentations, including our data on women in analytics and data science, SAS R or Python flash survey analysis, and our salary report recap, plus more. And now for what Linda and all of you have been waiting for, back to our regular scheduled programming, the Q&A. So let's jump right in, and feel free to continue sending your questions in using that chat question feature in the webinar. So first question for Linda. Are there particular areas in data science with high demand, such as deep learning or image recognition?
That's a good question, Mary. Certainly there are lots and lots of the applications in deep learning are really growing. However, you have to keep in mind that the vast majority of the applications still are in what I describe as predictive analytics. So they're working with data that's fairly structured. Nevertheless, the deep learning side is also growing pretty rapidly too. So it's something that we keep an eye on pretty closely here. We're also seeing some blending, which I think is interesting. So a lot of people who have a more traditional predictive analytics background are getting into working with unstructured data. The algorithms that are available now are much, much more sophisticated than they were even 3 or 4 years ago. So I'm seeing a lot of blending too, which is terrific.
All right, great. The next question is about your prediction about shakeout in startups, and specifically just to talk a little bit more about what you mean about that.
Okay. Well, I think that there's, it's kind of what I talked about. There's a lot of hype going on in the whole AI application and monetizing data and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of VC money out there in California, and it's sort of spreading to other parts of the country, New York certainly, and even throughout the Midwest. But there's people are going for the moonshot opportunities, the next Facebook kind of thing, and there's only so many of those applications that I think are going to actually make it. So there'll be a lot of fallout, but there'll be some winners too. So it'll be really interesting to watch. It sort of reminds me of what things were like back in 1999 and early 2000 with the e-commerce bust, and that was, not that many people were I mean, we're in a career, I guess, back then, but anybody who was may remember the fallout that happened during those 12 months or so, spanning 99 and 2000, to the e-commerce platforms that were sprouting up everywhere.
All right. And the next question is about the data translator role that we've talked about in the past, and we had a flash survey about, and asking what, if any, predictions do you have for that role, and what kind of background do you see that kind of person having?
Yeah, the data translator, or the citizen data scientist, as it's sometimes called, it has a lot, program manager sometimes is a name that's used, or project manager even. It's important to have a solid quantitative foundation, although you don't necessarily have to have somebody who's going to be able to, develop complex code, or, algorithms. Um, but they need to be able to communicate and evangelize the use of particular tools, and embed those into the business units. So it's a really critically important role within the organization. It's very new though, so it's only been around for maybe 2 or 3 years. So it's hard for me to say that I've seen any patterns. I've seen people go from analytics into this, but I've also seen people in the business units put up their hand and say, I want to be this person. So what remains to be seen then is, where do you go from that role? And I don't know what the answer to that is. So that's the thing I'd be a little concerned about if I were a quantitative person going into that role.
All right, and just a couple more questions here. We have a couple of people that are asking about learning Python, and if we have any suggestions on the best way to go about adding that skill to their resume.
So there's lots and lots of stuff available online. So definitely do your research, but the best way to learn Python is to use it. So find an application and use it. So there's just, I mean, everybody out there knows this, that you cannot learn to program from a book. So it's very important to get data, jump in on it, and learn.
All right, and then the last question I think we'll do, and I feel like we get this one every year. Are there any industries that you see emerging as far as data science and analytics?
Okay, I'm thinking. um, Boy, I can't say that I've seen any that aren't emerging. I mean, there's just, I mean, when you think about it, certainly retail, financial services, those are a couple of areas that data and analytics has been around for years and years and years. Certainly healthcare, there's some really, really interesting things going on in healthcare. Government needs to step up to the plate and get more sophisticated here. I'm not exactly sure what's going on there, but I want more to be going on. I am trying to think of some of the other ones that we're hearing about. It's just that it's everywhere. I mean, we're talking to a cement company, and I mean, here we are. I'm thinking about, okay, how can analytics be used in a cement company? But the number one goal of this analytics team is to reduce their carbon footprint by smarter use of data and building efficiencies into their process, which I think is just unbelievable. And I was like, I never thought of it. So applications are coming up everywhere. So it's very, very exciting. Energy is another area. It's huge.
Yeah, definitely. We hear about some really great stuff. Thank you, Linda, and thank you again to everyone who attended and asked questions. But that is all the time we have for the Q&A. If you would like to discuss your hiring plans or see if we have roles that are a fit for your experience, don't hesitate to reach out to us, info@burtchworks.com, and we'll get the process started. Thank you all for joining and have a great day.